If you are a fan of retro gaming, then this is just the series for you. We are covering the complete history of the gaming industry, which began with the first commercial video game ever sold, Computer Space. In our first episode of this series, we went over the creation of the computer space and how it was, unfortunately, a commercial failure. The cause of Computer Space's failure was largely due to the fact that it was a coin-operated machine stationed in bars, where drunk patrons frequented. The lengthy gameplay instructions were simply too complicated for the tipsy passerby. The creators of the game, Ted Dabney and Nolan Bushnell, did not let this failure stop them, however, as they went on to create a retro gaming console that changed the course of gaming history forever. Bushnell knew, despite the failure of Computer Space, that video games were the future of entertainment. He just needed a different approach. He needed something a bit more simple. Something that anyone could instantly understand, pick up and play. There was another issue, however, that Bushnell was facing. The name that he and Dabney chose for their company. The name Syzygy was already being used by not only one, but two other companies. As you can imagine, this posed a problem, and Bushnell was bent on fixing it. After all, an innovative new company needed to stick out from the crowd, and it's safe to say he chose an unforgettable replacement: Atari. You see, Bushnell often cited Go as his favourite game ever. It is a tabletop game originating from China, which later spread to Japan and Korea. The game resembled chess to a degree, and had its own terms for different moves and situations, similar to chess as well in that regard. One of those was Atari, a term used to define a check-like position within the game. Atari meant hit or strike, or to be dead on in the game of Go, and thus Bushnell and Dabney's company would go forth as Atari. A new name, however, meant nothing without a successful product to back it up. After all, a company is only as good as the products it has to offer. Atari needed to have a smash hit if it was going to survive. So, Dabney and Bushnell began looking for ideas for their next game. They would also hire another full-time employee in this period of time, an engineer named Alan Alcorn. The year was now 1972, and Bushnell was hungry for ideas on what his next game could be. With this in mind, he attended a public demonstration in Burlingame, California, a demonstration that would change the entire trajectory of Atari. A small electronic box was being shown off at the demonstration. It was called the Magnavox Odyssey, the world's first video game console. The Odyssey was the brainchild of Ralph H. Baer, a German-American inventor who had fled Germany right before World War II. He joined the American military to help fight in the war. It was after his service that he gained an interest in electronics, eventually leading to his fascination with the idea of playing games on a television screen. It was this fascination that would soon lead to his creation of the Magnavox Odyssey in 1969. Baer would call the Odyssey the brown box, due to the brown tape wrapped around it to simulate wooden veneer. This brown box was the last in a series of prototypes that Baer and his team had been working on since 1966. Baer showed this prototype off to several manufacturers before the electronics company Magnavox agreed to license his invention in 1971, releasing it to the public the following year. The Odyssey was as primitive as you might expect, being the world's first gaming console. For starters, the only graphics the console was capable of displaying were black and white dots, and not many of them. It couldn't even produce audio, and yet, at the time, this device was the most successful home gaming console of all time. It was a huge success, selling over 340,000 units, a number that Atari couldn't ignore. Bushnell and Dabney were especially fond of one of the Odyssey's games, a tennis game that was simple yet intuitive. You could look at the screen for less than a second and instantly understand the objective of the game. It was based on a tangible idea that already exists in society. It was a sports game, meaning that it could appeal to anyone who might be watching a sports game in a bar. It was perfect. Bushnell brought the tennis idea to Alan Alcorn, and gave him a challenge to program a coin-operated machine version of the Magnavox Odyssey tennis game. Alcorn would not only oblige, but he would even improve on Bayer's original concept. He locked the paddles on a y-axis, unlike the Odyssey version. He also increased the speed of the ball each time it was hit from player to player. This innovation would prove to not only make a more challenging game, but also a more addictive one. There had never been a game quite like it, and it is a game that you have most likely heard of before. This new game was simply called Pong. The first Pong prototype was released in a local California bar that Bushnell and Alcorn frequented, Andy Capp's Tavern. The bar had a good working relationship with Atari, so it made sense to test out their new game here. The first night that Pong was available for bar patrons, the arcade cabinet was quite a hit. It received much more traffic than Computer Space ever did, and its popularity only grew over the next few weeks. Though eventually a small problem began to rear its head. The machine began to exhibit issues that kept it from operating correctly. Alcorn was called to the bar to see what the issue was. If Pong were to be the game that would put Atari on the map, it needed to operate correctly. When Alcorn opened the cabinet to repair it, he found the issue right away. It was overflowing with money. This was all Bushnell needed to see. He acquired a line of credit from the bank and began expanding the Atari headquarters with an assembly line to create more Pong machines. He hired more workers to help keep up with the demand, but it was nearly impossible to get them shipped out on time. The demand for the game only grew exponentially, making its way all across the United States. Pong's success scored partners in other countries for Atari, and with their help, it went international. Pong was all across the world. Bushnell's proverbial golden goose had laid its first egg. Atari had a hit. If you like this series on the history of the gaming industry, then feel free to check out our previous video in this playlist and to look out for the next video in this series. If you found this video entertaining, then please give it a like and subscribe to TechNeo. Thank you for watching.